All right, the weeks are beginning to roll into one another, I'll be honest. I think we're in week 7 here. Our lockdown in California just got extended, which is no big surprise. And they're beginning to talk about what things will look like and phases in which they'll open it up, which is all great. But for the moment, we know that we're stuck in this paradigm. Today, I wanted to share with you an experience that I had a few weeks ago that got me thinking about our relationship with the news, and particularly with negative news. So I think I shared that at the beginning of our lockdown about a month and a half ago, I got sick. I had the dreaded cough. I had a fever that ran for about 4 days and spiked at 101. I was quarantined away from my family, which was really distressing. And I desperately needed the internet gods to supply me with something that would not send me into panic and fear and a real downward spiral. Did I find it? No, not even close. Every single article out there was death rates and images of overflowing hospitals and testimonials from people who had survived but could only tell us that it was the worst thing they've ever experienced. And yet, we were hearing from the experts that people under a certain age who were not immunocompromised and did not have any other pre-existing conditions were getting it and surviving. And in fact, some of the cases were so mild they didn't even know they had it, or they thought it was just a common cold or a flu and they moved on with their lives. I needed to know more of those stories. All I got was panic, hysteria, and at a pace that was just relentless. Is the media the enemy? No. Turns out it's us. There is a dynamic at play here that we cannot ignore. The media is full of negative stories because we click on them. If you're a publication, an editor, a journalist, your job is to get people to read your stuff. So you give them what they want. So what the hell is wrong with us? I mentioned that I'm a student of psychology, and I always go back there to break down phenomenon like this. And it turns out that yes, the human brain is more wired towards unpleasant news. And if you think about evolution, okay, that makes sense, because the risk of ignoring bad news could land you in some serious danger. Studies have even shown that we react faster to words like cancer and bomb, words that have a negative connotation for us, than words like baby and sunshine. So we're constantly scanning our environments for threat. So there's a new threat in town: mental fatigue and breakdowns from constantly ingesting negative information. I don't think our evolution took into account the development of the internet and social media. We are bombarded with news, and particularly negative news, 24/7 on multiple devices, in multiple formats, everywhere we go. And there's another little thing going on here. If you're a publication that has to churn out hundreds of pieces of content a day just to stay relevant and competitive, which, by the way, is every publication out there, well, then big things don't happen at such a frequent pace. So every small, gory detail becomes a story. I'm going to read this because I thought it was really poignant. The peace researcher, John Galting, pointed out that if a newspaper came out once every 50 years, it would not report half a century of celebrity gossip and political scandals. It would report momentous global change, such as the increase in life expectancy. So think about that. How much do you really need to know? And while you're thinking about that, let me tell you this. Constantly ingesting that much bad news is really not good for us. A study conducted in conjunction with Arianna Huffington's Thrive Global Initiative found that even 3 minutes of bad news in the morning could ruin your entire day. It's a good thing Trump's briefings used to be in the afternoon for me. But the overall effect is really bad. We're more anxious, we're more stressed out, we're more fearful. So in turn, we're consuming more toxic media. We're like jacked up hamsters, just feeding ourselves doses of cortisol that stresses out our entire systems. And I'll throw one more psychology concept at you. It's the idea of the availability bias, which means that human beings think that things happen more frequently because they can recall them more frequently. How many of us have actually had access to data of number of people that have recovered or the number of people that had mild symptoms? So all we remember is people dying and people not getting enough ventilators and politicians who can't tell their heads from their ass, really, when it comes to this whole thing. You see how we're responsible for this a little bit? Now, I know none of us are going to click on articles that are like, everybody lived today, or Will and Kate had perfectly normal day of royaling and parenting. Okay, fine, I get it. There has to be some sort of juice to it. But maybe we can own some of that responsibility so that we can balance out what the media is feeding us. I mean, they're tracking everything we think about, let alone click on. So we have a real opportunity here to send a message about what we are not willing to sacrifice, which is our internal equilibrium and well-being. So I have some thoughts on how you can do that. One, which is that I've been saying anyway, is limit consumption. You don't need to know 24/7. I don't know how many of you have access to print material, but that's probably a good way to limit the constant bombardment so that you can just get the highlights. Find the sources that are being responsible and empathetic. Editors, journalists, publications that you sense are looking to give you information or to entertain you or to enlighten you, but not to freak you out. And in return, I would shun those that are alarmist and inflammatory and just simply inaccurate, which I know is harder and harder given what's going on at the leadership levels. Of course, in this day and age, it is virtually impossible to shut out all negative news. So here's another really interesting piece of information. The research shows that for every single piece of negative information that you ingest, you need 5 pieces of positive information to counter that. Okay, so that's an interesting ratio, the magic number 5-1. So for me, I read the news in the morning, my head's about to explode, and I quickly put on some Bruno Mars or some Beatles. I cuddle a kid, I cuddle a dog, I will put my head down to do some creative work, and then I watch endless videos of Idris Elba. That works for me. Who am I kidding? Even pictures of him work for me. Funnily though, it does say that one big happy experience does not counter that negative effect. So it needs to be small and frequent positive interactions with the world. And that I think is actually good news, because right now it's really hard for any of us to do the one big thing. But we can control the small and frequent positive interactions. We may actually rewire our entire individual experience of this and in turn our collective experience of this. So here's my challenge to you. See if you can maintain the 1-to-5 ratio in your life. Share your experiences with me here on YouTube. Just the positive ones, thank you. I've got my own negative ones to manage, thanks. And maybe when this whole thing is over, we may have broken the cycle on this and we're able to lead the media instead of the media leading us. Cheers.